Diana, would you take roll?
Okay, Representative Baker.
Here.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Burt.
Here.
Representative Henderson.
Here.
Representative McGuire.
Here.
Representative Obermuller. Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Hungry. Excused right now. He was trying to get lunch.
And Chairman Burkhart.
Here. Okay, so with that, I'll just take these in order. So we'll start with House Bill 118. Off-road recreational vehicle registration amendments. Is there someone to present that? Mr. Rossetti, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator at WYDOT. This was a bill we worked a little bit in the interim. If you recall, the issue that we asked the committee to consider was last year when we implemented the ability to register dirt bikes, the language that was pulled into that statute read that the registration expires upon transfer of ownership of the vehicle. We simply asked whether or not this was a policy decision or an inadvertent change. Again, the issue at hand there is that conventional registrations for motorcycles, cars, trucks, trailers currently are done annually. This would be one of the very few registrations that would have a basically perpetual registration. So as we get into that bill there, the change is really on page 2, lines 3 and 4, and it just adds in the conventional language for registration that reads, the registration expires annually in accordance with Wyoming Statute 312206A and upon transfer of ownership of the vehicle. That's really it for the bill, sir.
Any questions for Mr. Rossetti? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based upon section 2, is there an estimate as to how much maybe could have been lost by the counties between the time the previous legislation was enacted and when this might take effect?
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Baker, we don't have a full estimate. What I can say is that since July 1, we estimate about 66 vehicles of this type have been registered. The actual value of the revenue lost, we could determine, but we haven't done that at this time.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Mr. Rossetti, correct me if I'm wrong. If my recollection is correct, when we changed the statute and I think it was last year, this was an inadvertent omission. That it wasn't the intent of the legislature to make these registrations permanent. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, as we reviewed the testimony from that particular bill and working with our county partners, none of us recall this being a topic of discussion, which is why we brought it before you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Not seeing any. I'll open it for public comment. Anyone in here wish to speak on the bill? Amanda, do we have anybody in the electronic realm?
Mr. Chairman, we have one online. He'd like to give a testimony. He can.
Have they raised their hand to speak on this bill?
They have not, but they are signed up for this bill.
Okay, all right, go ahead and admit them.
They're admitted, so they can just turn on their.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Burkhart, members of the committee. I won't take up too much of your time. This is Forrest Kaminga. I'm the Trails Program Manager for Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources. Director Westby sends his apologies. He was in another committee meeting at this time, so he asked me to jump in. As far as we're concerned, we're in full support of adding this wording to the bill, and we don't have any additional modifications or suggestions at this time. So at I will stand for any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Is there
you.
any other public testimony? Anyone else, Amanda? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by O'Hearn. Seconded by Brown. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if there's any appetite for the committee on just removing section 2 out of the bill. I guess in my area, we did have, and we are having a little bit of an issue with this now because people are looking at it as possible exploit in the law. And so now, 66 is a good estimate. I don't know. I think that people in certain areas of the state have maybe started to take advantage of this now. And so, I don't know.
Comments on that, Representative Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I'm trying to understand, Representative Baker, if you can help me understand your question. To me, are you saying getting rid of license plates on ATVs and the such? Is that what you're recommending?
Representative Brown? I'm sorry, Representative Baker.
No, just section 2, Mr. Chairman, that it makes it perpetual. So anything that was registered with this new registration is basically, it's a lifetime registration for those vehicles until this new bill would take effect. I mean, another way we could possibly curb that would maybe just, make this effective. It's immediately upon completion of all acts. So I don't know. It's
Any discussion on, other discussion on that? Right. So Representative Baker, I understand your concern and I would have the same concerns. I guess I look at it, if we delete that section, then the people who bought those registrations would need to then register them. But I guess I would assume that they registered them in good faith, thinking that they would be perpetual, and based on the current statute, they would. And I have some concern if we're going back, making a statute retroactive. So I would probably, I don't think that's not a good idea. I would prefer they registered them. But I also have this thing about going back and making statute retroactive. And I know probably if word gets out, we've passed this before the governor signs it, we'll just get a rush of people running out to register them. And I think we'll just have to live with that. We made a mistake, and I don't think the people of Wyoming should have to pay for our mistake. That's just my opinion. Anybody else? Okay, any other discussion? Okay. With that, I don't think we need to work this bill page by page. There's only 2 pages, actually 3 to it, and we only have 1 change. So committee?
Sure.
Yes.
It's already been.
It's already been moved.
Sorry.
We did public comment. Okay, it's closed. Okay, so committee? Question on the bill. Diana, would you call roll, please?
Representative Baker. Representative Brown. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire. Representative Obermuller is excused. Representative O'Hearn. Representative Stivar. Chairman Burkhart. 7 ayes, 1 no, and 1 excused.
Thank you, Diana. So for the committee, currently, based on our rules, Representative Obermuller is not eligible to participate remotely. If we had this meeting later this afternoon, assuming that rule change passes, he could, but I'm just following the directions I was given. So that's why if Representative Obermuller is watching, sorry, Representative, we'll meet again on Thursday and you'll be able to vote by then, I hope. Okay, thank you. So with that, next bill is House Bill 81. And Representative Byrd is on the ball because I was going to ask you to take the witness desk. We all need to keep a little formality, and it keeps us in practice of supporting our own bills. So Representative, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to keep everything moving along pretty quick. This is a pretty straightforward bill. Trying to bring into modern times the laws that we have in the books. Just trying to, like I said, really, I don't want to get into too much detail. I mean, I've already submitted the information out in an email. I didn't resubmit it again. We can go through the bill quick. Currently, as state law, as our statutes are written now, we require riders, regardless of their status, to ride astride on a regular saddle seat, motorcycle seat. And we have a population out there that are in wheelchairs that do currently ride motorcycles. And within our statutes, where the way that this is all written out is they are not able to legally ride within our state. So I had LSO help me with some language because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to get the language to what my intent was. So the language we have here is, instead of permanent seat attached or astride, it allows the language to address those concerns. Whether we have a rider that is riding in a seat that's designed for them with a seatbelt, or if they have a motorcycle that is designed to actually hold their wheelchair and locks into place. So that's where the language in A, B, and K are addressing, is how those riders are able to ride. It says that we're not allowed to attach ourselves or strap ourselves to a motorcycle. And the way that certain things happen and the way that our bikes are designed, it just kind of prohibits that from happening. When we get into section 2, I have a repealer. Talking with representatives of the manufacturers, this would help manufacturers design these bikes to accommodate for those that do have disabilities. I'll just stand for questions. I don't know who's thinking what. I can ramble on, but I just want to, instead of taking too much time from you, sir.
We have plenty of time. We have next Thursday also, or this coming Thursday. So Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, line 5, it has the phrase attaching a person. That relates to subparagraph K, which says that it doesn't prohibit it. And I'm just asking the question, what's your vision for how that's going to play out in terms of people understanding what that means?
Representative.
I guess I'm not understanding where your question is. I'd have to, I guess, assume where you're asking is, how do we determine what's that saying? How do we attach ourselves to the bike? Sir?
Representative Henderson, if you could clarify, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sure, I'll clarify. So we have a disabled child. He's an adult, and there's already a number of modifications, well tested, well designed for vehicles. And I'm learning more about the motorcycle piece. But as this reads, the plain text, it says attaching a person is not prohibited. I think what you're talking about is the driver, right? The operator. What about passengers, those kind of things?
Representative Burt.
Mr. Chairman, this is just for the riders. So if you have a ride, so to classify, we have riders and passengers, and we assume anybody on a motorcycle would be considered a rider. But in the terminology, riders are those that actually operate the vehicle, and passengers are those that are either in a sidecar or a seat behind them. What this is for is to actually allow those that actually are operating the vehicle to accommodate their status. If they're using a wheelchair and the vehicle is designed to hold that wheelchair and it straps that to that vehicle, or if they have a modified seat and then they pull the wheelchair to a storage area. Some of them do have seat belts. So this is to allow those that are actually operating the vehicle.
Follow up, Representative Henderson?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's room for us to, clarify this as it goes forward.
Okay. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, just curiosity here. The majority of the bill makes total sense to me. But then we get to the repealer. And the repealer is subparagraph N underneath, and it says, no person shall operate any motorcycle with handlebars so positioned that the hands of the operator, when upon the grips, are above shoulder height, when the operator is sitting astride in the vehicle seat with the vehicle in an upright position. Can you elaborate why we're removing that from a disabled person? Does this have something to do with the disability, a disabled person riding a motorcycle? Or is this we're sneaking this repealer in here because we want monkey bars on motorcycles? If I could just get an understanding of why we're repealing this inside the disability portion of this bill, I'd appreciate it.
Representative Burt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, thank you. So two aspects on that is talking with representatives of the manufacturers. This would actually allow them to help manufacture those bikes to those with disabilities. And I can't go into detail because each one that has a disability it's very specific to who has that. Sometimes when we have those laws in place, it restricts the manufacturers from being able to meet those demands. When you look at the National Traffic Safety Highway Administration and their 49 CFR title, there is no actual national standard on what's considered a safety standard on handlebars. When we look at Wyoming, here in Wyoming, and I'm sure we'll hear testimony after me, when we look at our highway departments, when we look at our crash statistics and our accident, there's nothing that's actually reported on relating to handlebar height as well as related to a safety standard.
Follow up. Other questions? Any other questions? So, okay, so Representative, I'm on page 2 and I'm on lines 1 and 2. Person operating a motorcycle shall ride upon or astride, and the existing language would be the permanent and regular seat attached thereto, designed to be used by the driver, etc. If you delete the words permanent and regular, are you getting rid of a requirement that currently exists on motorcycles to have a seat? I mean, I've seen people ride them standing up. I've seen people ride four-wheelers standing up. I ride a snowmobile standing up at times. But if we delete those words, are we deleting out a requirement for, let's say, non-disabled people? I just need some clarification on that one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a question I had with LSO. And when you read upon or astride and then if you remove the seat designed to be used by the driver. So when you remove the permanent and regular and just go to upon or astride the seat designed, the design to be used by the driver covers that because it would be on the manufacturer or even an aftermarket seat would be designed for a specific vehicle. And when it attaches, it would still be designed for the rider, for the driver.
Okay, thank you. And so Representative, another question, well, two actually. So, and actually staff had this question and I told staff I would ask it. So how would a person in a wheelchair who may not have use of their legs actually ride on a motorcycle? I think that's more of a curiosity question for myself also.
Sure, it's a really good question, Mr. Chairman. So the Federal Motor Carrier Association actually defines motorcycles of 2 wheels and 3 wheels. So in a 3-wheel, like I said, the manufacturer designs to where you can actually roll your wheelchair into the back of a designed trike. That's what we call them. 3 wheels would be trikes. If you ever get into and watch some of the extreme motorcycle games, I don't have a specific rider on top of my head. There are riders that are paralyzed from the waist down. that when they sit there before they actually take off and run their run, they have their team will actually hold them up. And once the motorcycle is moving, that the force will just keep them up as long. Now, granted, if they fall over, it's no different than, me getting off, falling over or somebody else. How to get out of the bike would be different. But I've seen extreme rides that, paralyzed down that can still ride two wheels. How to get on, how to get off, how to stop and go, of course, will be the challenges. And they usually have a team for that. Where these will work at is they also have manufacturers that usually these will fall under the trike. And it sits on a 3-wheel. They can roll the wheelchair into the back, or they can roll up to the side of it and then move themselves from the wheelchair to the seat on the bike and then store their wheelchair behind it.
Okay. So my last question then would be referring to what Representative Brown had asked about the repealer. How would you feel about changing that on the handlebar heights, that the height can be changed to accommodate a disabled or partially disabled rider rather than eliminate that section completely?
That has been brought up, Mr. Chairman. Within that, when we look at, there's no national safety standard, and like I said, we just don't have a standard here at the state. And I set it up, and originally it was set up for the disabled riders to make sure they can justify it. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to determine what the safety standard is. And I can tell you as an avid rider myself that somebody else's bike that I might sit on might not feel comfortable to me. It's not set up for me. And someone else that puts a lot of miles on their bike might not ride for mine. And each of our bikes, when we get into the community, when we ride, we build our bikes and design our bikes to those that fit our comfort level. And we can say that handlebars might look good at shoulder level, but it might actually make a rider uncomfortable, which in a long term could actually make them unsafe. So I would urge against pulling that out as a whole. And I would like to keep that in there.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I've looked at this in the past, and I'm just you're absolutely right in understanding that there's no safety standard, but the whole understanding from what I had gathered in the past, and this is when I used to sell motorcycles, was monkey bars, riding above shoulder height restricts your blood flow to your extremities. And so if you're riding long distances down the interstate, whatever the case may be, you can actually go numb and not realize that you're going numb on your hands. And it can also restrict the movement on the wheel and restrict the availability of you being able to maneuver your bike in a safe manner. I'm not 100% sold that completely removing it's a bad idea, but I'd be curious to talk to the Highway Patrol and anybody else who may have some interesting statistics here for us to help us understand whether or not when they see motorcycle crashes, anything along those lines. No, they're not measuring those handlebar heights, but it's pretty easy to tell. The other thing that I would be interested in, maybe you can inform us on this, is this enforced by law enforcement on vehicles that come from out of state? We see a lot of traveling through the state for Sturgis and whatnot. People could be pulled over for it. Technically, they're against the law, but they have passed through. So can you give us a little bit of information on that?
Representative Burt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, great question. So to answer, I guess we'll kind of jump around on that. Since 2011, I did a request from the Highway Patrol. The last 2 years, I'm still waiting for. Since 2011, we've had 72 citations written in the state. Of that, 47 of those were written during August, the month of August. We can assume why. And of those 72, the state has only collected since 2011, $3,600. Right? So it's not a huge impact. It's not a huge fiscal impact. When we talk about the ape hangers, as you call monkey bars, are called ape hangers. The technology back in the 70s, when this bill was first written out, the clutch systems, the braking systems were obviously a lot different than where we're at today. More of a mechanical type clutch. So the longer you rode, right, the more the pressure built up, and it took more force to actually get the clutch in to disengage and slow your bike down. Today's bikes and technology nowadays are more hydraulic. So I can ride 800 miles in a day. Although fatigued, my clutch system is still the same as when I took off. So while I may be a little bit more tired with there's a lot of miles on there, it doesn't take any more force to slow down after 800 miles than it does 1 mile. Just the technology updated now is what we're trying to bring into it. With that, we're also trying to bring in the law. There are a number of states around us, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, that do not have handlebar laws. And when I did a search and a request, we didn't have the data on how many of these 72 statute or violations were from out of state. So I don't have that number for you, but being that we have a number of states around us that don't have handlebar laws and they come into the state, sure, we could be ticketing somebody outside of it. Yes, sir.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking forward to the implementation, should this get enacted, how would we certify that the requirements are met?
Representative Burt.
I don't know thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not understanding the question, like certify, like, I guess we would stop pulling disabled riders over. I'm not saying it is, I don't have the statistic if we are pulling disabled riders over, but if we pass it and we make our laws current to where we have riders that are not violating our laws, then we wouldn't be pulling them over.
So, excuse me,
Representative Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to add a little more background. When we set up a regular vehicle for our son, we had to go through quite a bit of modifications, both to the braking, the acceleration, all that. And then we had to get it inspected. Okay, now I'm just asking, if you buy a new trailer, for example, before you can register, you got to go get it weighed. That's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of pretty important requirements on here. The seat or the saddle, where you store the wheelchair, those kind of things. How do we verify that those are at least at starting point? I don't say they got to do it every day or every year, but how do we know going out the first time out that they've met the requirements of Wyoming as far as our statute?
Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Henderson. So currently in statute, we don't have a requirement of how a bike is built. That's per the manufacturer. And when we have other states out there that allow disabled riders to ride these bikes, I mean, we can do an internet search all day long and we can see that's out there. We aren't trying to break out into the industry and develop something that's not currently out there. Manufacturers, in the inherent nature of what they do, are going to try to build a product for a demand that's out there. Now, when they do that, they have to meet certain specs, which in the federal motor carrier's requirements. And in that requirement, it does lay out how controls are supposed to be labeled out. And manufacturers have to still follow those regulations. Like I said, we're not trying to start a whole new industry, just trying that doesn't exist. It does exist. We're just trying to bring our laws up to date to meet those current standards and allow those that are already out there in other states to be able to ride in our state legally.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, just you mentioned the price point that we have of, like you said, $3,600-ish. In some of these communities that are relatively close to the South Dakota border, think Sundance, Hewlett, that kind of stuff, that's a lot of money that could go into when they're enforcing those areas. So what do you say to a community like that utilizes this statute? As they growing forward, they're pulling people over for these, as you call them, ape hangers, monkey bars, whatever the case is. They may be utilizing this as a little bit of a revenue enhancement for their community. Removing this, what does that do for you?
Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Brown. The last time that I don't have data for 2019, it just hasn't come in yet. But 2016 was $210, 2017 was $425, and 2018 is $170. I mean, if we're relying on a couple $100, then I think we have some other issues. The 3645 was since 2011, since the last 10 years as a whole. Yes. So we also have 2011 through 2013 that there were no fines collected, for whatever reason. I don't have that, but the biggest, we may have made $1,000 in 1 year. So I'm not concerned on that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just mention some clarification there for those who may be listening online or watching online. In Wyoming, fines on state highways and the interstate highways go to the school district in which those fines were written, while city fines and that go to the town or county or city. But just so people understand where that money does go. So, any other questions? Okay. Representative, you'd hang with us? Oh, you have another one?
Yes, just one more.
Okay, Representative Henderson.
Okay, I just want to represent the voice of one of my constituents who's contacted me a few times on this bill. And the main point that I remember from his messages is that the opportunity that presents to enable many people who are in a disabled situation who love to ride motorcycles. And toward that end, I think it makes a lot of sense to consider this legislation, but I want to make sure it's safe. Wouldn't you agree?
Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I 100% agree. As an avid rider myself, I take safety at the utmost whenever I'm riding, and trying to be able to bring our laws to modern days to include everybody. But we don't want to, put somebody in harm's way. Inherently, when I get on a motorcycle, I make that choice as a personal responsibility.
Okay, Representative, just hang with us and you can come back up here and join us if you want again. Okay, so with that, I'll open public testimony, and I noticed we had a few representatives in the audience. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson.
And Representative, thank you for being with us. We rarely get any other legislators in this committee who want to speak.
Well, I thought I better get up
Thank
here
you.
because I'm a co-sponsor on this and maybe one of will lead contacts, I guess. And I kind of pushed it off on our Representative Burt, and I sure appreciate him bringing it forward and adding the disability part to it. The constituent that I had visited with was an avid motorcycle rider. I'm not. I like to ride on a dirt bike and such, but anyway, he wanted to bring it so you could have your handlebars a little bit higher than what is legal in Wyoming, and especially because of the northeast corner getting all those motorcyclers during the summer. And if it gives a reason for them to be pulled over, I don't think that ought to be there. If other parts of the nation do not have the height requirement and they don't know it, obviously they should, but it does make it difficult. So mainly I'm here to support the constituent that brought it forward and asked if we could remove that.
Any questions for Representative Larson? Any questions? Okay, thank you, Representative.
Thank
So
you.
I thought I saw Senator Sweeney or Senator Salazar rather in here earlier. Did he have to leave?
Yes, he did have to
Okay,
leave.
thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you.
Representative Fortner, did you want to speak on this bill? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Representative. Okay, with that, let's see, anybody from the governor's office? Hang on, we have an order we're supposed to follow. Chairman Wilson can tell you that. So, okay, so state agencies. Colonel, you're anxious, I can tell. So come on up here and tell us what you think.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee,
Microphone, please.
I can never tell if it's green or red. I too am always eager to sharpen my skills. Mr. Chairman, Kevin Haller with the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Whenever I first saw this bill come out, as you might imagine, I had some concerns, probably like many on the committee. As I performed some due diligence and began to look through what other states had done, and of course, all surrounding safety concerns and issues, I became more educated specifically to other states enacting statutory language that allow for people with disabilities to operate a motorcycle. As was brought up by Representative Burt, We do enforce this law, but we don't do it very much. As you might imagine, during August, the annual Sturgis rally, it was mentioned the northeast part of the state. You are correct. That is primarily where we would see this type of handlebar setup on a regular basis. And at times it is enforced, but again, it is not a regular occurrence. Additionally, it is most often enforced from out-of-staters. Though we do see this type of configuration in state, traditionally it is from bikes passing through. Specific to the monkey bars or what some refer to them as in the motorcycle world as ape hangers, that was a big concern of mine. And so in looking at that a little bit further, technology drives a lot of things, and it also includes the safe operation of a motorcycle. With that, also reflecting back on the good representative's testimony, Bert, technology and the systems with the clutch where you may be concerned about leverage. If you do have your arms up above your shoulders and you're operating a clutch, you might think that that's a safety concern. In the old days, that would be true. And so we may have some older style motorcycles out there with this type of configuration with high handlebars that could potentially be a safety issue. But with more modern motorcycles, it's just not. Technology has improved that capability, I believe, thus reducing, if not eliminating, that safety concern. So with that repeal, I could find no evidence that we have more motorcycle crashes or fatalities regarding those higher spaced handlebars on motorcycles. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Colonel Haller? Questions? Okay. Thank you, Colonel. Anyone else from YDOT wish to address the bill? Okay. Any other state agencies? Do we have any on the Zoom? Okay. Members of the public, please. If you identify yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben Hornock. I live in Lerma County here, and for several years in the past, I taught the motorcycle safety in the motorcycle safety program for Wyoming, and really did enjoy that. I enjoy riding as much as possible with our weather, but I do enjoy riding. I just urge your support of this bill. Seems like this is just a matter of bringing Wyoming into the modern day, frankly. As was said, every manufacturer works very hard to make a motorcycle that will be safe. They won't sell a motorcycle that they haven't vetted as not being safe. And I think there are people even with disabilities where you're talking even have difficulty in balance. So they ride the trikes type of thing. And so one of the reasons why we ride motorcycles is generally the freedom. And if you watch the freeway during August, as has been said, there's a lot of bikes that, do have the ape hanger bars, and I like the idea, not necessarily of regulating that. I like the idea of allowing people to make that personal decision and make that safety decision, just as we do with helmets. We don't have a helmet law in here, Wyoming, and I would prefer to keep it that way because we as individual riders get to make that decision for ourselves. And I appreciate that very much.
Any questions for Mr. Hornock? Any questions? Thank you very much. Anyone else in the room wish to speak on the bill? Okay. Amanda, anyone in the virtual realm? Okay. One more time. Anybody else? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Move the bill. Second. Okay. Any discussion, comments? Committee? I will make one comment that bothers me a little bit, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I think it's a good bill for disabled citizens of Wyoming to be able to enjoy the things they like. I guess I have some concerns that people are concentrating too much on section 2. And that, but that's the committee's choice. I would ask that the bill remain the way it's originally written for those who have disabilities to be able to ride and concentrate on that section. So those are my comments. I'm done. So any amendments, anything else on the bill? Okay, question being called. Diana, would you take roll?
Representative Baker,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Burt,
Aye.
Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Obermuller is excused. Representative O'Hearn. Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye, and Representative Burt, it's your bill. I guess you'll floor manage it, and I think you have an idea of what questions might be asked. Okay. Committee, I'll back up quickly back to House Bill 18. Any volunteers to floor manage that bill? Representative Henderson, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move to House Bill 82, Military Discharge and Benefits. Chairman Wilson, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my 10th year in the legislature, and this is the first time I've ever been to the Transportation Committee. So
Well, welcome.
Thank you
We'll
for
try
that
to see that you
opportunity.
get here more often.
And I've quintupled my knowledge about motorcycles. So I bring you House Bill 82, and I will say that my presentation of why I'm bringing the bill will far exceed the time that it will take me to explain the bill. So if I get, I'll try to not get too wordy. So those of you that have been with me for some while know that I have pretty extensive military in my family. My husband is retired from the Coast Guard. Both his brothers are retired from the Army. His father was retired from the Air Force. My son-in-law just got out of the Marines. My father was in World War II. My grandfather was in World War I. And I had family members in the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the French and Indian War. So things that come, I never served myself, but things that come up related to the military kind of get my attention. So you all know that back in September, President Biden announced that he would be requiring COVID vaccines for federal employees, including the military. And I mean, I think that was a bad idea, but I don't argue that the commander in chief has the ability to make decisions for the force. So the bill is not brought as a specific to, whether you like vaccines or not. It's something else. And I also do want to just say, this bill did not come to me as a request from the adjutant general or anyone I just want you to understand that came from my head, not from the military folks' head. So after the president's announcement, unfortunately, I feel we started to see really some suggestions that the discharges of military members might be fairly punitive. In September, there was a quote from the Army spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Times, that continued refusal could result in court-martial. In the next month, October, I happened to get a copy of a message from the Chief of Naval Operations that talked about seeking recovery of bonuses, that the people might be discharged as general unless other categories. And I actually received 2 phone calls from Wyoming Guard members stating that they were supposed to be reporting for, some duty type thing, and then next weekend, and that it had been suggested to them that if they didn't get a vaccine, that they might face jail time. So you can imagine I called the governor's office and I called the General Porter, and I will say, I just want to be firm that that was not something that came out from the general. I mean, my idea is it was probably an over-enthusiastic sergeant, and having a son-in-law who is a sergeant, they sometimes get that way. But anyway, it came to me that,
Chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
a caution on that one.
Don't impugn sergeants.
Yes.
Yes, sorry. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So Now I forgot. where I
Continue
was
if you
going.
can.
I don't know if it's possible to go on without that, but anyway, so Mr. Chairman and committee, we're not in charge of what the federal government does, but we can affect what happens to Wyoming. And even if you don't have military service in your family, or you can't even think of a Wyoming constituent that you know that was in the service, we do have the 4th highest per capita number of veterans in our state. And I think that this obviously is of interest to them. So let me just, go on a little bit more. And maybe I should kind of touch on what the bill was in case somebody hasn't actually read it before I explain myself some more. What this bill would do is just state that if a service member is discharged with something lower than an honorable discharge solely because of their refusal to get a COVID vaccine, that for purposes of Wyoming benefits and exemptions, that would be counted as an honorable discharge. And just to be clear, this bill doesn't require any extra money. It doesn't give people any extra benefit that they would not be otherwise entitled to if they had an honorable discharge. It doesn't change residency. I mean, I'm not going into the specifics of any exemption or benefit. I'm just saying that if the person is discharged with a general discharge, let's say, which is the second low, I'll go over that a little bit, and they can document that, and the military services have basically gone into this whole counseling thing and all. There will be email chains and counseling records and all that kind of thing, that it will be counted as an honorable discharge. So let me just back into my information a little bit more. And I did give you all a copy of this information in case you have a constituent or somebody wanted to ask you about it. And you all, this is the military committee in addition to the transportation committee, so you probably know all these things far better even than I did, really. Honorable discharge, of course, is the highest level. Then there is a general discharge under honorable conditions, and then it kind of goes downhill from there, other than honorable, bad conduct with court martials and that kind of thing. Now, as I was starting to draft the bill, there was an amendment made to the National Defense Authorization Act out in Washington, D.C. It passed in December to state that the members of the DoD-funded armed forces could not be discharged with a lower than honorable discharge. I will say, of course, the Coast Guard is not covered under the NDAA. It's not entirely clear to me about the coverage of the Guard services, but I continued with the bill because, as we all know, an amendment to the budget lasts as long as the budget. And so maybe no one will ever take advantage of this, but it seemed to me that it was worth going on. Just a little bit as far as discharge data. Through February 10th, the Navy had discharged 240, but Forbes magazine says there's up to 8,000 more pending. They don't know, of course. The Marines had discharged 566, another 9,000 pending. Air Force 142, the active duty Guard and Reserve that haven't been vaccinated, there's 19,000. The Army had not announced. I mean, the numbers are potentially large, whether it would ever be 1, 2, 20, 80. Thinking of the friends of my sergeant son-in-law, I could see that it might be rather large. And exemptions are very few. The Marines have given 3 exemptions, religious exemptions so far. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So just briefly, and again, you folks are probably very familiar with the benefits. We've got the Military Service Relief Act. We've got employment preferences, waiver of licensure fees for the time that you were in service, requiring honorable discharge, free tuition for dependents of deceased veterans who served honorably, burial in the State Veterans Cemetery, occupational licensing to consider your military training. You have to be honorably discharged. We know the property tax reduction, which gives a $3,000 exemption to people who have served honorably. You can get a special license plate at the regular cost if you've been discharged honorably. And there's a number of other ones, and that's on your page, Mr. Chairman. So I'm really not even doing it for financial reasons for the military member. I mean, some people take advantage of some of these benefits, others really don't, and they're not huge in many cases. I just feel that, especially with our Wyoming people who have served faithfully, honorably, may have been deployed multiple times, had every intention of carrying out their service requirement, to be discharged on something other than honorable for something as disputable in my mind as this, it wasn't how we wanted to treat our veterans in Wyoming. So that's why I brought this bill, and Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for Chairman Wilson? Any questions? Representative Brown.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. I want to say thank you to Chairman Wilson. When this came out, my first thing was to go look at the NDAA as well. And I contacted the chairman immediately, and we had a very quick email conversation that she basically obliterated all of my concerns with it. But she had done her work on this, and I really appreciate her corrections on what I was concerned about. So thank you.
Other questions? No. So Chairman Wilson, I do have one on a discharge. Is it possible to identify that a person was discharged for refusing a vaccine? That's my concern with this. That you know, you could have any number of reasons for a discharge, you know, including retirement and that it really is for refusal to get a vaccine. So is that somehow identified on discharge papers or in records or anything like that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I don't know that General Porter is here to be my lifeline on that issue. And I've not actually looked at my husband's discharge paper. I don't think it would specify that. But I don't actually know. The burden would be on the discharged service member to retain, you know, paperwork from their email or something like that to prove this. I mean, is how I look at it. I will personally be trying to make this known. I mean, if it passes and the governor signs it, I'm going to try to maybe get something in the newspaper, maybe a TV discussion or something. I mean, I think it's worth sharing with, you know, the American Legion posts or whatever. But you know, it is on the military members. Well, even to get these exemptions. I mean, I won't bring up my son-in-law again.
All right, Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the 214, the DD 214, which is our actual official discharge paper, it has all of our exiting information out there. And if you have issues of why you're leaving, then they are coded. So I've been out for a number of years. If I try to go back in there, it'll look at that and it will state within those codes why we've actually had that discharge in there. So it should actually identify it.
Thank you for the clarification, Representative.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Representative Stiver.
Yes, Chairman. There's a reentry code like 1A, 2A on a DD 214, and it's also on the NGB 22, which is the Guards version of the DD 214. And that'll tell you if you can go back in, you can't. If you were chaptered on, you know, pregnancy, whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative. Another clarification. Okay, so Chairman, if you'd just stay with us, I think it's obvious the only other group in the room is the military department, so come on down. And General, I'm kind of surprised to see you here after an email I got the other day. I didn't think you would be coming to see us for a while.
Yes, sir. You know, things in the world are still rolling on, and apparently they don't need me to be part of that just yet. So Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to be here today.
Okay, General, Mr. Smith, please proceed.
Thank you. I think from the military departments, just for the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter. I'm the Adjutant General for Wyoming. Chairman Wilson was gracious enough to share the bill early on in her in her drafting of it. And the only thing that we really identified was similar to what you and the rest of the committee identified on the DD 214. How can we tell if it was for COVID or not? So there's a little nuance in there. The DD 214 will say discharge for misconduct in this case of COVID, but it won't say.
General,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may interrupt just briefly, and again, for anyone who might be listening online, am I correct? The DD 214 is your discharge papers, just so everyone is clear on what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. That is the
Okay.
discharge paper.
Thank you.
And it will indicate
the reason for discharge, as the committee has said, but generally it'll have an abbreviated sort of reason. It'll say for misconduct. And our concern was then how do we differentiate misconduct for refusal for COVID vaccination or any other kind of misconduct? I think as we kind of worked it through with the military department, as Chairman Wilson said, there is plenty of information on why an individual was discharged that they can bring forward to establish it was for COVID-19. So the initial concern that we had, I would say we do not have anymore. And sorry, I think we stand for questions and clarification.
Okay, so General, before I open it up, so you do support the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions for General Porter or Mr. Smith? Okay, I'll go with Representative Burt first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General. So in order for a service member to receive anything other than honorable discharge, there has to be a bit of paperwork to identify that, correct?
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burt, if I understand correctly, no matter what kind of discharge will be, there'll be quite a bit of a paper trail to it. The DD 214 will say, like I said, it'll give reason for discharge as misconduct and probably an RE3 code. And then that's the extent of what the DD 214 will say. To further establish that it was for COVID-19, there is some additional discharge paperwork that will clearly say this is why that not part of the DD 214, a separate bunch of paperwork that you would bring forward to show this is why I was discharged, the type of misconduct.
Okay. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for our legal counsel, I'm curious, of course, you didn't draft this, but this definition ends up in the common law statutes, which is a really curious place to put it in the Wyoming statutes. I would think it would be in the military code. Common law is kind of a funny thing. It has a habit of evolving and changing and being applied in other things and being applied in the future. So I'm just curious if that came into your consideration as you read the bill. Thank you.
I guess General or Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly the general can answer as well. As Representative McGuire noted, LSO did draft it, and that's where they put it. One thing that I discovered when I started trying to make myself a list of where all the benefits are, they're all over the place. If you look at the bottom of the handout that I gave you there in Title 19, Title 33, Title 39, Title 31, Title 23. So I would hypothesize that they thought putting it up at the front so that it would broadly apply wherever we in the future put in some code that would be helpful. And Mr. Chairman, if I'm sure you have plenty of things. Certainly your committee came up with a lot of interim bills, but there could be a tidy up project on some of these exemptions and benefits in your future, but they may know more about the legalese than I do.
Okay. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Smith, the Senior Counsel for the Wyoming Military Department. And what Chairman Wilson said is my understanding as well, having dealt with other bills. Title 19 is the military department's title, but the types of benefits that this legislature has graciously granted veterans truly are all over the place. There's occupational licensing, there's skilled nursing center and vet home stuff. So it made sense to put it in the general definitions, which ended up being, in this case, Title 8.
Follow-up, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there in looking at page 2, line number 7, so this would apply to benefits for members of the Wyoming Guard, but also any veterans of the United States Armed Forces, which I'm curious if you think that might be getting out of our lane a little bit insofar as granting benefits or, well, I would say granting benefits to other branches over which we have no say and don't know what the circumstances were. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, when you look at page 2, the meat of the bill, lines 5 through 11, it only applies to providing Wyoming benefits or exemptions. it would have no applicability to anybody else's, any other state or the federal government's benefits. That's their business. But as was mentioned by Chairman Wilson, there are a lot of benefits that have been granted to Wyoming veterans. And so this bill would apply across the board in Wyoming to Wyoming benefits only.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, General, I would add two questions. First, what's the current policy within your chain of command relative to the National Guard, DOD interface and so on, preparation, readiness? Go ahead.
Representative, I think we need a little more clarification on
Thank you.
what you're specifically speaking to.
Relative to the virus, relative to the vaccine, relative to what we're trying to do here.
General, Mr. Smith, any?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, so this has not been approved by the governor yet, but my intent right now is if we are to discharge folks based on a refusal to take the vaccine, it will be under honorable conditions. It will be an honorable discharge. And that's currently where my head's at the moment.
Follow-up, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So building on that, with that in mind, that would make this moot, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, it would for the Wyoming Guard. However, the elegant part of this bill is that it applies for an Army person that was discharged on active Army and returns to Wyoming and wants to take advantage of benefits.
Sure.
So that would be really the great impact of this. And I also would say, although I have no intention of changing my stance here, if something were to happen where I get overruled or above me it gets changed, this also would protect that too.
Okay, just final follow-up.
Follow-up?
So my final question really has to do with the area of things that might be perceived or could be perceived as perhaps prejudicial to good order and discipline. What does this send to those who have done all the things and have been discharged honorably without question, particularly also those who have been wounded or maimed or that kind of thing? General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, it's a good question and something that, I've obviously thought a lot about how do you approach this, because certainly the vast majority of our force has taken the vaccination and has driven on and said, hey, listen, this is what I was told to do. But as I think Chairman Wilson pointed out, we also have a good portion of the force that this is an individual decision that they just can't get to. And they've deployed, served honorably, have done all the things that the United States has asked for them. So when it came down to the ultimate decision of can you remain in the force or not, I think where I came down at least was, hey, if you're not going to be able to take the vaccine and be ready, we're going to have to part ways. But we don't have to part ways punitively. We can shake your hand, tell you thank you for the service that you've rendered. And if you absolutely can't get past this vaccination discussion, all right, then we will just have to part ways. So that's where my head was at.
Follow up, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you, General, appreciate that.
Yep.
So how can we be sure, we say they've otherwise served honorably. How can we be sure of that?
General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, the DD 214 will be very clear about the type of discharge that they get. And if it's for, misconduct, which likely I'm thinking, Chris, you can keep me back in bounds, but I think most discharges on this COVID refusal will be a misconduct discharge, a failure to obey lawful order, that sort of thing. The NDAA certainly says, I don't want to come back. Let me stay with that. It'll be very clear that it's misconduct. Then it'll be up to the individual to sort of prove up, was it for, what other discipline would you say, Chris? Anything outside of COVID-19? If it was too many traffic tickets, if it was failure to obey a lawful order, what other theft, anything like that?
Striking an officer, it could be anything.
I guess I would.
Commander's daughter. That's a big one.
I would say that I think we can be very comfortable that we can determine the type of service that the individual had was honorable or not.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you. This is very much appreciated, Mr. Chairman. So is it true, and my understanding is, unless things are changed, if you're discharged under a general, under other normal, you have a period of time to go in for an appeal. Is that true?
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, there is a process that you can ask the Board of Correction of Military Review to upgrade your discharge. It is a federal, there's one board for each branch of the service, as there's Air Force, Army. It is made up of civilians. Generally, it's kind of a rumor thing in the military that you can always just get it upgraded. It actually, the application process requires you to come up with something that was not considered during your separation. So it is not something that is automatic. You have to actually prove to this board, it's actually a paper process, that something different occurred than was considered by the command that separated you. So it is not, very few of them get approved in my experience.
Any other question? Any other questions? Representative Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just add a few things to this. As I said at the beginning, I do not disagree that the president is the commander in chief and has every right to make commands that go down the chain of command about what people should do. So this bill does not in any way change the consequences of a person receiving, a less than honorable discharge, as far as, and I don't know what they might be, but, the VA or other benefits, or the fact that the federal government may attempt to claw back all of their training costs. We're not touching that, and that is the consequence that will fall on them. The only thing that this bill touches is what we have decided in the Wyoming legislature to give to people in recognition. And I don't want to get into a discussion of whether we think the vaccine was a good vaccine or a bad vaccine. I do have on the form that I gave you a list. It was really quite interesting of some other conditions that are deployable. And I'll just leave you to look at that yourself. But the argument being that a person, if they had COVID, say that they might not be deployable, and that would be the harm to the service. It really was quite interesting. And I have a rather lengthy paper from DOD on what you can get a waiver for deployable on. That probably a lot of us would look at that list and think, heck, I don't want to be out in the desert next to a person with that condition. So again, this is specific to what we have decided in the Wyoming legislature to give benefits for people who have served. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me add that.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Okay, and we'll continue with public testimony. Anyone in the realm out there, never land, and no one in the room. With that, I'll close public testimony. Committee?
Move the bill.
Second.
Moved by Stiver, seconded by Brown. Discussion of the bill.
Question.
Question being called. Diana, please take the roll.
Representative Baker. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Obermuller's excused. Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 no, and 1 excused.
Okay, thank you. But Chairman Wilson, I assume you will floor manage your bill. Okay, so.
I set aside already lined up.
Okay, thank you. All right, so committee, and we can, if we're going live, Amanda, we're kind of adjourned, but I want to talk to the committee a minute about interim topics. So you can